Here we're looking at section number 4 in our algebra review. And we only have one real learning target for today, and that's we're going to be dividing polynomials using synthetic division. So in our third section in A3, we looked at dividing polynomials by long division. Now we're going to be using synthetic division. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So we're going to use synthetic division to find the quotient and remainder when I divide x cubed minus 4x squared minus 5 divided by x minus 3. So let's walk through these steps. So the first step is I have to write the dividend, so the thing I'm dividing, in descending powers of x. So the big thing here is I have to add a 0 in for anything that's missing. So I end up with 1, -4, 0, because I didn't have any x terms, so I have to put a 0 there, and then -5. And I only care about the coefficients here. I don't really care about the x's. So that's going to be my main row. So I'm using dividing, right? So I'm kind of dividing by 3 right here. And this is always going to be x minus c. Always with this minus here. That's the big thing that can get lost a lot of times, is it's always going to be x minus something. And then this is what goes in, that's what I'm dividing out here by. Okay, so don't forget x minus. So now I bring down my first row. So I take down the 1. Okay, always we're just going to take down the first number. It's always that step. So then, once I've brought that down, now I go ahead and multiply that 3 times this 1. So 3 times 1 gives me 3. Okay, so now let's look at my next step. So I had 3 times 1 is 3. So now I add -4 plus 3 is -1. And now I'm going to do what I just did again. So 3 times -1 is going to be a -3. Then I add 0 plus -3 is -3. 3 times -3 is -9. Then I add -5 plus -9 is a -14. So now I'm out of terms. I've run out of things to do. So I know that that last number right here, this -14, will be my remainder. So this is going to be the remainder. So now I can rewrite my quotient. It's going to be x squared minus x minus 3. And generally, I like to start over here on the right side. So this will always be the constant. So your last will be your remainder. So it's always going to be remainder, then your constant, then it will be your x term, then your x squared term. And if we keep going, the next one will be your x cubed, and the next to the 4th, and the next to the 5th. So it's easier for me to work kind of backwards going this way. And we'll see that in just a second. Okay, so I can just double check and multiply those out and see what I end up with. And when we do double check that, we do see that I get what I started with. Okay, so now we can also use synthetic division to verify a factor. So I'm told, hey, this is a factor. Now I need to verify it. So I follow my same steps. I'm looking at the coefficients in descending order. And here I see I have an exponent of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and a 0. So I'm not going to have to add any zeros in. But here, make sure you remember I have an x plus. So this is the same as x minus a -3. So the thing that we're going to put out and deal with is this -3. Okay, so let's look at this solution. Okay, so again, I place my coefficients. You know what? Let's work through this one on this page. Okay, so I'm going to have my coefficients being 2, 5, -2, 2, -2, and 3. So then my number over here, and you can draw it this way. A lot of books draw our division using synthetic division this way. It doesn't really matter, but I've got this -3 out here. Okay, so the first thing I do is I bring down this first term, so I've got 2. Then I multiply. -3 times 2 gives me -6. Then I add 5 plus a -6 is -1. -3 times -1 is a +3. Then I add -2 plus 3 gives me 1. -3 times 1 is -3. I add 2 minus 3 is -1. -3 times -1 gives me 3. I add -2 plus 3 is 1. -3 times 1 gives me a -3. So when I add here, I end up with a 0 as my remainder. If I end up with a 0 as my remainder, then I can say, yes, this is a factor right there. If I ended up with some digit, some number here as a remainder, then no, that would not be a factor. But since I ended up with 0, yes, it is. So then I can rewrite this. So this is my constant term, and I have minus, right? So plus 1, so minus 1x plus x squared. So this is my x squared, right? So constant x, x squared, x cubed, and x to the fourth. So I have 2x to the fourth minus x cubed plus x squared minus x plus 1. That's my final what I could write out. But for here, we're just verifying. And since this was a 0, then yes, it is a factor. And in the solution, that's exactly what we end up with. Okay? So then we can write it out as well. So really, that's it for synthetic division. So let's just make sure we met that learning target, which all we did was dividing polynomials using synthetic division. The biggest thing I need you to remember is that we have to insert a 0 if we're missing any powers of x. So start at the largest power and work your way down. Add zeros in if we're missing anything. And then we bring down, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add until we get our final answer.